Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to class today. Thank you for joining me, whether you're watching live or you're watching the recording. I just appreciate you watching. This week, we're going to have a look at some of the stuff that will help you out as you are working on finishing your bootcamp assignment this week. The whole big thing for the first week, or the first module, I should say, since it's technically the second week after the begin here. Is this whole bootcamp build, right? And trying to just refresh ourselves on what we know about HTML and CSS. After this week's due date, so it'll be on Friday, I will assign the groups for the group project, and we'll talk more about it next. Well, I was going to say next live class, but we actually won't be able to have a live class next week. I will be unavailable in the afternoon. Maybe I'll do something. I'll do a pre-recorded video probably about the groups and post it along with the group information on Friday. Will probably be the best way for us to do things. So we'll do that. So with that being said, I just want to do a little bit of demo today. We'll try to go through basically just my process of building a website. And it's going to be just a super simple website. We're going to be following this this assignment, which is in our class. Just a super basic website assignment. We have a logo here. We have a list of qualifications here. Outside of that, you basically get to do whatever you want. So we're going to just do a little bit of code, and I'll try to not take too long with it. We'll try to do about 30 to 45 minutes doing this and explaining it as we go. So I won't do necessarily everything that's here, but I'll do most of it, or a good chunk of it. So one of the first things that I like to talk about when I do this module is I like to talk about my setup. The module recommends some code editors for you. Me personally, I like working with Visual Studio Code, which is available here on code.visualstudio.com. If we zoom into that up there so you can see it a little closer, code.visualstudio.com. This is what I use to write a lot of my code. It's got the terminal built into it. It's got the extension ability built into it, which we'll talk about that in just a second. Got a lot of good stuff going on with it. You can use it for Windows, Mac, Linux. There's even a version you can use to build on the web that has basically all of the same functions and features. That's at vscode.dev. But I have the Windows version here, and that's what I'm going to be using today for the demonstration. Looks like there is a new update. We'll install that later. But the first thing that I'll go over here just is my my setup for my extensions. There are a bunch of extensions that I have installed. Way more than you would probably want or need. The big ones that I really like using are this live server here. Specifically the one from Ritwick Day. Also, alternatively, live preview from Microsoft. Both of these give you the ability to have a live server that's going to show you your code and have it working properly, which is incredibly useful. Also, this prettier code formatter here is a very useful one. Just shows you some nicer code formatting. In order to install an extension, you would just search it. So I would search live server. I want to find the one that's by Ritwick Day, because that's the one that I'm recommending. You can see that there are some others that are trying to kind of copycat there, and they actually have a lot of downloads. But if you look at the Ritwick Day one, they have 52 million downloads. It's a really popular one. But you would just click the green install button on it, and it would give you the ability to install the extension into your project or into your code editor, which is really cool. And there are a ton of extensions that you might want to use. You can see I have a bunch installed here for different purposes. Teaching different things, writing different code. They just, they're helpful. So once you all have all that kind of the way you want it, you're going to want to create your project. The way that I usually create my projects is I start just in Windows Explorer and creating a folder. So I'd create some sort of folder. So let's create one that's called, let's say, Web 140 Fall 24. And inside of here, let's make a new Bootcamp demo folder. All right, so now that I have that folder on my machine, I can open that folder with Visual Studio Code. So I can go to File, Open Folder, and navigate to Visual Studio Code. And I know it's basically going to be impossible on the live watch, so it is something that I would recommend for the the recorded viewing. As you're going back and watching this, if you kind of taken pause while I'm doing some things and maybe rewinding a little bit, people in the past have found that's pretty helpful. Kind of tough to do on original watch, but if you're watching it live, that's another good benefit of the recording. So here's that Web 140 Fall 24 folder. And there's that Bootcamp demo folder. I'm going to open that folder up and select that folder. And yes, I trust the authors because I am the author. And now I'm in that folder, right? And so one of the cool things that I can do here is I can start to make files and folders in this window here, and they're going to translate to my Windows Explorer. So if I added an index.html, because all of our initial web page names are going to be index. That's going to add it here, and if I check the folder on Windows, it adds it immediately. If I wanted to create a folder that, say, I wanted to put images or media in, I could make a media folder here. I could make another folder for, say, style.css and have my CSS sheet in here, although I don't want it there because that's in the media folder, so I want to kind of drag that outside of the folder so it's on the same root level with my index.html. Now, one of the first things that we see when we go in here and we look at our Bootcamp website build is it says it needs an HTML skeleton. And if I'm using VS Code and I have an HTML file open, I can do my HTML skeleton really easily by just adding an exclamation point to my document. And that'll bring up something called Emmet in our preview window. We can see exclamation point, Emmet abbreviation. That's going to, when I hit enter, it's going to expand that exclamation point out and do the entire HTML skeleton for me, like so. Right, super simple. One exclamation point and enter, and everything's filled out. To make sure that my code is W3C compliant, I am going to update the title that it's given me here. This is going to be for the egg truck. The best in eggs. And so just like that, I have the basis of the website that I'm going to build. Right, and so one of the things that I do, and you see it a lot when you're looking at different structures of websites, is I go ahead and lay out my structure. As you're looking at HTML, one of the things that we consider when we're thinking about HTML is this idea that HTML is basically the blueprints for our website. So I'll use some HTML5 tags like the header tag, the main tag, and the footer tag to just denote the biggest parts of my site. And this is also going to help me in applying this structure now. It's also going to help me later on when I go to add CSS to all of this. And so if you're in Web 2.10, the website I think we're going to build today is going to be pretty similar to what we built yesterday. Maybe we'll do a few things that are a little different. But I think I'm going to go ahead and maybe build it a little differently today than I did yesterday in terms of actually adding some structure to it right off the bat. So I'm going to go ahead and add my H1s and H2s. And the way I did that yesterday, and really one of the best ways to do this, is to just use AI to kind of write this stuff for you. Right? Like, I don't necessarily, like, this is a fake website. You're not being graded for the text that you put on the website. So this is a good use case for having AI just write us some quick text that would allow us to have something for our website other than like dummy text. Right? And so I'll just use the open and available version of ChatGPT here, and we'll just type in some instructions. I am making a class project website for an egg dish based food truck called Egg Truck. I would like to have some copy for the site. I need 3 paragraphs, 1 heading, and 2 subheadings worth of copy. Do not write the code, just generate the text. And go. And there we go, right? We have some headings and some subheadings and some paragraphs here. So I'm going to use this as my heading level 1, these 2 heading level 2s, and then our 3 paragraphs, and I can just copy and paste that into the page. All right, so inside of my main tags here, I'll add my H1. I'll add welcome to Egg Truck right in there like that. I'll add my first H2, the exceptional food experience. We'll throw that in there like that. We'll add a paragraph here. The first paragraph from our generated text. Very good, very nice. Another H2. Eggs done right anytime, anywhere. We'll throw that in there. And then we have 2 more paragraphs here. One and 2. Right, and this just makes it look a little more appealing, because if you actually start to read the text, it's not just dummy text, it's actual real text. And so I think that helps us kind of put things into a frame of reference a little more. It would help us kind of think about maybe other images that we want to add to the site. It just makes things a little bit more realistic and a little bit easier for us to kind of wrap our heads around design-wise. And so if we wanted to look at what we have so far in the live server, we could just right-click on the page, select Open with Live Server, and that's going to open up a window in our browser that has our website in it as it stands. Now, currently, this is pretty ugly, right? Because, well, we just have the basic text in here. So we should probably add some CSS to this, right? Before we get too far. If we look back at our assignment, we can see that we're given a logo. So let's take this logo and use it for some inspiration. The little chicken inside of an egg. Got the name Egg Truck on it there. Let's save this image. I will download this and call it Egg Truck logo.png. And now I can add that to my project. And in order to add that to my project, all I have to do is simply drag it in. So I can find my downloads folder, find that Egg Truck download there that I just did, and just drag it right into the media folder in my workspace here. And one of the great parts about that is if I look at my work folder and I go into the media folder, there's a copy of the logo right there. The logo's still in my downloads folder, so I have a copy of it there. Everything's pretty good. Right? Easy peasy. No problemo. So I'm going to use this logo image here to kind of give me some inspiration for some colors. We see it's got yellows, it's got oranges, those sort of colors that kind of make you think about eggs, I guess. So they'll be the colors that I use as the basis for the site. But before we can add any CSS, we need to add a link to our CSS file in the header, or in the head, I should say, not the header, in the head of our document. So we will say link href equals /style.css. And remember, the / is a relative positioning, so even when you zip all these files up and send it to me, as long as the style CSS file is in the same folder as the index.html folder, everything is fine. So rel equals style sheet, type equals text/CSS. And then this is a self-terminating tag, so we can just put a / greater than to end it there. And my style sheet is saved, or is linked in my HTML file. This is the only way my HTML file is going to know that CSS file exists. So I need to make sure I put that in there. We'll go ahead and save that. In order to make sure it works, I'm going to add a little asterisk selector into my CSS file. That asterisk selector is a wildcard selector. And I'm going to do a font family change here to Open Sans, comma, Arial, comma, sans serif. Right, so this is going to change the font of everything on the site. Right now it is a serif font like Times New Roman. Once I hit save on this CSS file, it will become a sans serif font, specifically in my instance, since I have Open Sans on my machine, it'll become Open Sans, but this is the sort of list of fallbacks here, right? So if you have Open Sans, if your user has Open Sans, it'll show them Open Sans. If they don't have that, it'll try Arial. If they don't have that, it'll just use whatever their default sans serif font is. I'm going to hit save on this. And we can see, just like that, it changes the font. All right, so super easy to change the font to a sans serif font. Let's change the background color of our site. And in order to do that, we do that on the body. I'm going to take the background color CSS element. And I think I want to do something in that sort of orange range there. Like if we look at that orange there on the beak, that's kind of a lighter orange. I kind of like the idea of the background of the website being orange, like an egg yolk sort of orange. And I'm just kind of winging my demo today, you know, because it's more fun that way. And so let's try to get this right. So if we remember what we know about RGB color theory, we know that equal amounts of red and green make yellow. So if we want to make orange, we want 2 times the amount of red. Then we have green. And I also want it to be pretty light. So I'm going to go all the way to FF for red. For green, I actually want it to be a little under half of red here. I want it to be a little more reddish. So FF is 255. Half of 255 is going to be 128. If we do our hexadecimal, 128. If we do our hexadecimal conversion here, 128 divided by 16 is 8. So it's going to be 80. So I want to go a little bit less than that. So let's say 7A. And then I need to add my blue here. Let's start in by, let's give it a little bit of blue. Let's make it like 2-2. And that's going to give us a vibrant orange color there as the background of our site. All right, a little bit subdued. I might want that to be a little bit lighter, so I might want to bring up that blue value a little bit. Let's try something like 4A. And just see where that goes with it. A little bit lighter, a little bit more yolk-like. Right, we're trying for an egg yolk color here. So I think that's pretty good. I think we'll stick with that. One of the things that we would talk about in other classes that you wouldn't necessarily have had yet would be variables, HTML variables, or CSS variables, I should say, which would be something that we could come back to later. in this course if we wanted to. But putting that dark text onto that orange background makes it a little bit more challenging to see. So what I might want to do is take that main section and make that a background color of white. Right, so in doing that, we get something that looks like this. Now we can notice a few things here, right? There's zero room between the text and the edge of our box here. So we're going to want to add some padding. It looks a little bit weird with this being full width. So I'm going to want to shrink that down a little bit. So let's say we have a padding of 12 pixels, just to give it a little bit of breathing room, right, from the edge. Now, one of the things that you might notice here is that we have this border all the way around. We want to get rid of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus my HTML tags. I'm going to say padding 0, margin 0, just like that. I'm also going to do that on my body. So I could technically just do this instead of adding it to the body tag like I was going to do there. So if I do that to both of those, that will reset padding and margin that my browser puts on it by default and give me something that doesn't have that border around it. So now I could take this and make it a width of, say, 75%. Maybe. Ideally, you probably wouldn't want to do something like that, right? Because we'd want to work in like a column organization. Something like that would be more important when we got to talking about Bootstrap. So I might want to work in, say, tens. But if I wanted to work in fives, then I'd have 20 columns. If I wanted to work in tens, I'd have 10 columns. So I could technically do that, or I could do something like, say, 60%. So let's make that 60% in there and just check out what it looks like. Right, there it is, all over to the left-hand side. I could center that up by doing the margin centering trick, which is going to be margin 0 auto onto that container. And now that looks pretty good. Some things that I might want to do really quickly here, like one of the things that our brief asks us to do is to make the heading text a different color. So that would be pretty easy for us to do. Because I can just focus our H1 and our H2 and add a color CSS attribute and make it some sort of different color. And in this case, right, we could just use the same color that we used for the background. That might be a little too light. Right, it might not have great contrast for us. For the purposes of this demo, it's probably fine. Right, but realistically, I'd probably want that a little bit darker. I might want something like CC 5, 9, like 00, something like that. Something that would just be a little bit darker to give us a little bit more contrast, to make it a little bit easier to read. And one of the things that I might want to do in this instance would be like center up that H1. So I could add my H1 and add a text align center to that to get that nice and aligned center there. Pretty cool. Let's focus this header now. We haven't really done anything with it. I am going to want to add a nav here. In the Web 210 class yesterday, I demonstrated the nav HTML5 tag, which I do believe that I want to do that again today. So we'll just add some links for home. And we'll just make 4 of them here because you're required to make 4 of them. We'll do home, about, order for order online, and then maybe a contact page. And that puts our links here at the top. What I might want to do with that, right, is going to be, let's do something more in the yellow family here, like maybe this light yellow for the background of that. So we can focus our nav tag here. And we can make a background color there of, let's say, let's see, that's going to be yellow and it's going to be light. So light is going to be equal parts red and green. So it's going to be FFFF. And then we're going to want to give ourselves a lot of blue, but not all of it. So let's try CC and see what CC does. I think that's about spot on. Right there, if we save that and see it in our project. One of the things that you could do to kind of give it a little more pop would be giving it, like, say, a border bottom. But in this case, I wouldn't necessarily give it to the nav. I might give it to the header. So let's add our header here. Let's give it a border bottom of 3 pixels, solid, and that darker color that we used for the H1, H2 might be kind of interesting. Let's see what that looks like. There we go. So we can kind of see that there now. One of the things that I talked about yesterday is CSS grid. And that's going to be an easy way for us to kind of do this nav. So if I did something like display grid and did something like grid template columns, 1FR, 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 1FR. Then we could have something that spanned the entire page, which is kind of interesting. And then in our nav links, so we go nav greater than A, I could text align center and change the color to some sort of different color. Like, let's just, we could probably use that same orange. Let's see what that looks like. Looks like that. Looks pretty good. Let's add a little bit of padding to our nav as well. So let's add maybe 6 pixels of padding to our nav. One of the things that we might notice here, I think it's okay. You know, in Web 115, you would have talked about box model. Remember that in order to break the box model, you can use box-sizing border box to not worry about all the weird box model stuff. But that's not a huge deal here. Let's add our logo into the site. And I think I want to add it into the header. I'm just going to add it right here. So we're going to add an IMG, SRC equals, it's ./media ./egg truck _ logo.png. And that's a self-closing tag. Actually, I don't need that dot. That's not an actual dot that we would use. And so that adds our logo into the site. Which is pretty cool. You can see I almost got it exactly. They're just guessing at that color. So I might want to center that image up. So we'd go to the CSS for that. Just so I specifically impact the logo, I might want to give it an ID of logo. So then in my CSS, I could focus hashtag logo. Since it is an image is an inline element and not a block level element. So the first thing I'm going to have to do is make it a block level element. Display block. And then I can use margin, whatever. So let's say 12 pixels, auto. So 12 pixels of margin on the top and bottom, auto on the left and right. We save that. That will center up our logo. And that looks kind of cool. Right, we've got our navigation here, we've got our logo here, we got our 3 paragraphs. Let's look at our brief here. So we can see, okay, HTML skeleton done. 3 headings of at least 2 different levels done. 3 paragraphs done. 2 pictures we've done. 1 picture. We'll let you figure out the other one on your own. Heading text should be different. Done. Header section with a basic menu with at least 4 menu items. That's done. Separate CSS file. That's done. A food menu with 3 to 5 items with prices. I'm going to let you figure that one out. So this will be one for you to figure out on your own. Let's wrap our time up today by doing this one and making a footer section with a copyright note. And so I'm going to make my footer section just a dark gray. So I'm going to take my footer, focus that element selector, and I'm going to make the background color of it to be, let's say, something like 525252. Or maybe something even darker, like maybe like 252525. All right, let's give that a min height of, say, 200 pixels. Right, a little bit of a taller footer in terms of a footer, but a footer nonetheless. All right, so if we look at the bottom of our page here, we see we have our taller footer here. We could, if we wanted to, sort of mirror this border bottom with a border top. Let's add that in. I'll even go back here and find where we did that here with the header. Put it down here with the footer. And change that from a border bottom to a border top. And that'll give me a little brown line there that's kind of hard to see. But it's okay. We'll put a paragraph inside of our footer here. So that's a paragraph with our copyright notice. So that's and copy semicolon. That's how you make that little copyright symbol. Egg truck 2024. We'll save that. In our HTML, we'll take our footer focus paragraph. So that's footer greater than paragraph. So that's going to be for all paragraphs inside of our footer. We'll make the color white. We'll make the font size a little bit smaller with we'll make it like 0.8 em. And we will make it text align center. Like so. And then I'll just put my little copyright notice right there. If we wanted to push that to the bottom, we could just add a little bit of margin to that. Margin, top, let's say, since our footer is 200 pixels, well, the minimum height of our footer is 200 pixels. So we might even be able to do this where we say margin top 200 pixels. And that'll just kind of push it down. A little bit too far down. Let's pull that back up a little bit. Let's go like 180 here. And that should do us good to have it down there at the bottom. Maybe smaller still. Let's try let's see where 100 lands. And tweak from there. When you're using static values like this, sometimes you have to do a little bit of guessing and checking. That's why oftentimes we will use percentages and responsive values so you don't have to worry about doing things like this. There we go. That looks pretty good. And so for our purposes, this is where we'll stop today. We're going to upload this to GitHub. So this will be kind of a preview in terms of some of the things that we're going to be doing in the near future. I'm going to be going to my GitHub here. I'm going to go to my repositories. And I'm going to create a new repository for Web 140 24 FA Bootcamp demo. And now I have a repository created on GitHub for it. And I'm basically going to follow these commands here. So I'm going to, in my VS Code, I'm going to open my terminal. I'm going to get init, get add period to add all the files in the project. All right, we'll talk more about this when we get into working with Git in the next couple of weeks. Git commit -m initial commit. We will add the origin from GitHub by copying it and pasting it. And then we will push git push origin master. And that will push it through, push it to GitHub. So once I refresh the page here, you'll see there's my code. Another one of the things that we'll talk about is using GitHub pages. So if I wanted to make this an active site, one of the things I want to do is make sure that this HTML file is named index. I can go to my settings. I can find pages. I can select the branch, which is going to be the master branch, and save. So now not only have I published that page online, published that code online, I've actually published the page online to be something that you all can look at from there. And so I will share this with you all with the recording today. And so with that, we'll go ahead and wrap things up for today. Thank you for watching. We'll go ahead and kind of pause here for a second, take questions. I'll also hang out in the chat for just a minute or two afterwards and take questions. If you're watching the recording later on and you have any questions, please send me an email or a Teams message. But that's all that I have for you for today. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.